Chung, your go-to for all things marketing, mindset, and manifestation. I grew my online business from 0 to beyond 6 figures in 8 months. My purpose is to empower women to step into the highest, most aligned versions of themselves. If you are ready to take charge of your life, learn how to design a wildly successful business, and leave limiting beliefs behind, you've come to the right place. You will learn the actionable tips and step-by-step strategies on money, manifestation, and social media. It's time to step into your role as boss, to raise your vibration and tap into your unlimited potential today. Welcome to the Social Reset Podcast. I would do a recap of my story. I've shared my story before of how I've come from food stamps, being a broke single mom, to building my multi-6-figure business, building my company. And I've talked about this on my podcast as well. If you scroll down to the first couple of episodes, I talk about my story and what it actually took to get from this place to where I am now. But today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the energetics and the mindset shifts and breaking out of victim mentality and a couple other things that I've noticed since I've evolved, of course, from that first time I shared the story, and being able to pinpoint a couple of things in the way that I used to think and the way that I think now, which are drastically different. And I really want to emphasize that because I think a lot of you that have been following me for so long, you know kind of what the well, maybe not, right? But I feel like some of you know, like some of the steps, some of the action. I share about that, but I don't think I talk so much about the mindset of what was happening internally and what I had to believe about myself and what I had to stop believing, what I had to start believing in order to actually step into this version of who I am today that I never thought would have been possible a couple of years ago, like literally just a couple of years ago. So I'll start with kind of where I was, what I was thinking, where I was energetically, what I believed about the world, what I believed about myself. And then I'll tell you how I began to just transition out of that way of thinking and what sparked that to even begin with. And then how I actually made the changes happen once I realized that maybe it was possible for me. Because I think that that's really important too, is like sometimes you know something is available to you, but you don't know how to actually get there. So a couple of years ago, so my daughter's 8 now, and all of this really started when I got pregnant with her. So about 9 years ago, like almost 9 years ago, when I was about to get pregnant with her, when I was pregnant with her, that was a very dark time in my life. I remember my mindset just being very like woe is me and very, despair and hi, thank you for joining. And I was just very stuck in victim mentality. I just felt like life was happening to me. It was just like just my luck, right? I was still a very positive person for the most part. Like I've always been a very positive person. I've always had a more abundant mindset about things. And so I was, for the most part, positive, but at the same time, I still carried this weight of negativity and I still carried this weight of, are things actually going to get better for me, right? I used to be the type of person that wasn't really ambitious, didn't really want to get things done. And I was very much in victimhood. I was just very much living in this story that I had created in my own head, especially when I did get pregnant and I was kicked out of my parents' house and I was living on my own, essentially living with my daughter's dad. We separated when she was around 9 months old. So at that point, I was living on my own with a newborn. I was 19 at this time, and I was so frustrated and I think also so resentful because all of my friends, especially when they turned 20 and 21 and were able to go to bars and they were able to go to, go dancing and go enjoy themselves, and they were going to discover yourself as you do as an early 20-year-old, right? That's what you're meant to do. And little did I know I was in the biggest way, just not in the way that I thought it was going to happen, right? Um, so anyway, I was seeing all my friends doing these things and I just thought, oh my gosh, and I was at home, I was breastfeeding, I breastfed for 2 years and I was changing diapers and just taking care of my newborn, in this, off and on relationship with her dad and just in this place where I felt very, it was like this energy of despair, right? Which is really one of the lowest vibrations that you can be. Despair, hatred, the bitterness, right? I was very bitter. I was very much like blaming people around me. I was blaming my parents that they didn't offer, better sexual education for me, even though that wasn't necessarily their fault and is also a cultural thing, right? Like in Asian families, you don't really talk a lot about anything. You're left to your own devices. I was blaming my daughter's dad because he wasn't around and he wasn't helping, especially in those first few years, right? It was like very difficult to now he's an amazing dad, but like the first few seasons of newbornness I felt like was very much on my shoulders and was really, really hard. Like if you know anything about raising kids, and if you're not a parent, it's like 100 times harder than that. It weighs on every single thing. It was postpartum depression. I was so depressed. I was so just like in the dumps. I had suicidal ideations. I was just constantly like in this cloud of darkness. And I really just got used to it. It was like it became a very familiar place for me to live because I didn't think that there was anything outside of that for me to aspire to, right? I was kicked out of my parents' house. For a while, they didn't want anything to do with me. They didn't support me having, my daughter at first. They just didn't feel like they didn't understand any of the choices I was making and anything that I was doing, right? I just felt like, and I was actually not going to have her in the beginning. I had set up an appointment to get an abortion. Women need rights for abortions. Always, 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 always. That's a human right. It's a healthcare right. But I ended up going to one of my first appointments. I didn't realize I was pregnant until the second trimester just because I have such irregular periods. So I was already several weeks in. And I didn't really have any symptoms or anything. I didn't really know. I was a little bit nauseous towards the second trimester, which is how I realized I was pregnant. And I was like, okay, maybe I should go and take a test. And of course I was pregnant and I went to the doctor, and one of my very first appointments was to find out, was to just check on my health and make sure everything was okay. But I was so far along because I didn't know I was pregnant, that I ended up finding out, the gender. And so I don't think it was the gender. It was, they were able to print an ultrasound, right? If it's way too early on, you can't see anything. They can't print an ultrasound because you don't see anything. There's no evidence of it yet. But I was so far along that they can print an actual picture of, the baby in my womb. And so I had that, that gray ultrasound picture. And as soon as the doctor left the room, I just felt, which now I know is spirit, universe, kind of just stopping me in my tracks and going, you're meant to mother this child. Like you're meant to have this child. And I just felt it so strongly and distinctly when I was so set on having an abortion. And so I was like, okay, I'll, I just felt so like overcome by it that I couldn't explain it. And so I decided to have her. And this is when I just turned 19. So at that point, I ended up telling my parents, I actually told my mom like right before Thanksgiving dinner, which was the most awkward and uncomfortable dinner I've ever had ever. I didn't mean to tell her that day. I was going to tell her, I think after, but I think mothers just have such a strong intuition and instinct that she just knew. And so it was very, 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 I would never want to relive that moment. And then having my dad find out, which was like even more heartbreaking, seeing my dad like so upset and seeing my parents so upset. It's just a really hard time that unless someone said, I share a similar story, unless you've gone through it, there's no way to like really explain this to someone. You have to have gone through something similar in order to know what it's like to be a teen mom or to be a single mom or just to be a young mom is like very, very, very challenging. There's a lot of societal norms. The church that my parents went to ended up like, they stopped talking to them, would say all of these things about me behind my back, behind my parents' back. My parents ended up leaving. It was just a whole mess. And so eventually they told me I couldn't live in the house any longer. And I ended up finding like this very small and cheap like bedroom to stay in. It was kind of like a studio, but it was very, very small. Just a couple hundred square feet. So that's where my daughter's dad and I started. And then that is really where like I could still feel and see like the darkness over this memory in my life, because it was so filled with, despair, right? Like despair. I don't know what the word for that would be. Like it was just very it was very dark. Like I didn't know what to dream outside of that, right? I didn't know what to believe about myself or about others, about the world. Everything that I had thought was flipped upside down, right? Before this, I wasn't even allowed to go to school dances. I'd never been to a high school party. I'd never done drugs or drank or anything. I didn't drink until I was 21, and I don't drink anymore. I'm sober, actually. So I don't drink at all. And so I grew up in a private Christian school, grew up in a very religious environment. So in a way, I was very sheltered. Not in a way, I was very sheltered from what I felt was the outside world. And so being on my own at 19 with a newborn as a newly single mom, I felt like I was kind of thrown into the pit of like the lions or the tigers, whatever the analogy is. And I just felt like it was a whole new world for me to explore, yes, especially as a new mom, but also it felt very restrictive, right? Like going back to, I was 19, my friends were going out and, having fun and discovering themselves and discovering who they were. And I felt very restricted to, I have to get food on the table. I have to work so that my daughter can afford, baby food and different things that she needed in order to survive, right? Like my mind was on so many different things, and my friends would tell me about, their like relationships and partying and drinking, all these things. I couldn't even relate. I lost so many friends. I think I maybe kept like one or two close friends during that time because I couldn't relate to my friends anymore, and they couldn't relate to me. They didn't know how to help me. How could you? How could a 19-year-old friend help a 19-year-old single teen mom that is living a completely different life? Like there's almost no way, right? But also, of course, I received a lot of criticism from my friends saying like I should have never had my kid, and like I'm not responsible enough to be a mom, and all of these things. And so of course I had to release a lot of people from just my inner circle and my sphere in general. And so it did cause me to be very much alone and feel very, very lonely in this space, right? So this is where I was several years ago, just feeling like everything was happening to me. I felt like everything that was happening to literally to me. Like I felt like the world was against me. That was my mentality. Like this is the time that like Snapchat was popular. So I remember posting on Snapchat, and I would be like, I would say things because I've always just been very open and very honest and just very much an open book. Like I don't hide anything. I don't feel any shame. I just feel like, I don't know, that I like sharing my story and it's helped so many people. And so I continue to do it. And I've just never had any shame around it. I don't really feel like I need to keep certain things to myself. There are certain things that I do, of course, keep to myself. But for the most part, I'm very, very, very open. I've always been that way, which is funny because I'm a Scorpio. So yeah, around this time, I started sharing like on Snapchat, I started sharing my story, and then I started sharing, some of my thoughts. I remember some of the things I would post were like, I just feel like the world is against me and that like there's no good that can ever come from this, and I like, when are things going to get better, and why does this keep having to happen to me, right? And so that was really my mentality back then, which is really interesting because like if all of you have found me now within this past year or 2 years ago, I am obviously a completely different person. Like I look at the world completely differently. So I want to start talking about the shift. Like, how did I start shifting from that way of thinking and being and living my life to this abundant, free, unapologetic, flowy, just financially free version of who I am right now? Yeah, someone said it did. I'm an Asian too who was in a religion and getting out of it now, realizing I'm powerful, not what the church told me I was. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really big part of my story too. Was I was raised in a religious environment where I was told this is how I should be, this is who I need to rely on for power, right? Like, I had no power of my own. I was only worthy because of, Jesus or God or whatever the fuck. And I left all of that, like, fuck all of that. It was just so judgmental. It was so filled with judgment and criticism and hatred, right? Especially when I became a teen mom, when I came out as queer. There was just so much judgment that I just choose to not fuck with for the rest of my life. I still have a relationship with God as the source of the universe, and I have a relationship with the universe, right? But different than the God they teach in the Bible, which I don't live my life by the Bible anyway. Okay, so moving from that way of like showing up in my mentality, that mindset, I think the first transition into a more abundant mindset, I think, came from when I started my Instagram account. So I know some of you, not many, have followed me since my beauty blogging days. So I used to be a beauty blogger and a lifestyle blogger. And I started my Instagram for that reason. I started because I started watching makeup videos and tutorials online, and I just love the beauty community. If some of you have been following me since then, it's been so long, but I used to be invited to like the benefit parties and Fashion Nova parties and some of the other like really big makeup companies in either the Bay Area or LA, right? Like, I live in the Bay, and so LA is not that far from me. But all of them would take place like either in LA or like here sometimes in San Francisco. Like IPSY was a really big event that would happen every single year, and I was a part of like the IPSY creators, and I actually like marched with them in the Pride Parade because IPSY had their own parade float, which was really cool. So I just got, that's actually where I started my career with social media. Was I learned so much about social media marketing and just marketing in general by learning to collaborate with brands, because this is when brands first started to collaborate with creators. And I would used to have to explain to brands what it means to collaborate. I would say, okay, you would send me this product, I would post about it, this is my rate. At that time, they were rarely like paying creators. So it was a lot of like gifting, right? But I would have to explain to the brand what I can do and what they can get out of it. And I would create my own media sheet and show them like my engagement. Because at that point, I think I had like 40 or 50,000 followers that I had grown from my beauty community. So that's when I first started to realize like, wait, it was just a passion of mine. When I started, I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't really plan on being like a professional makeup artist or anything. It was just a fun outlet for me. And so the more, and even looking back now, I feel like the more I tapped into my joy, the more I tapped into what made me light up, the more I followed that, the more magic continued to ensue in my life. So that was kind of the first taste of it. I began following some other people that were a lot of influencers and creators. I was not submerged into the coaching industry. I didn't even know there was a coaching community when I first became a coach. I know that probably sounds crazy now, but I really wasn't. Like, I didn't even know it existed. But yeah, back then I was just really submerged into beauty creation, and just beginning to live a little bit more abundantly and starting to break out of the victimhood, because I realized, and I might not have realized it as distinctly as I can see it now, but I saw the effects on how it was affecting my well-being and for my daughter, and just everything that it was like just starting to affect. And I started to realize, because I was still in this, abusive situation, in this very, I should just say, unhealthy, very toxic situation, relationship wise, I started to realize what this was going to do for my daughter and what I was showing her and what I was teaching her, right? And I started to realize how familiar it had become to me to live in this state, and how it was so second nature for me at that point. And I realized that I didn't want to wake up 20 years from now and still be in that same place, feeling that same way, being at that same rock bottom, hitting it over and over and over again, and realize that this was the life I was creating for myself and for my daughter. And it took a lot. It took I'm not going to get into the details. There was people that had to be called in. There was a lot of things that went down during that situation. So yeah, that essentially was me perpetuating this reality, because we always create our own reality. Our reality is always created by ourselves, 100%. Always, right? I do think that there is shit that just happens in the universe. I think there is just shit that you can't necessarily explain, and shit just happens. People have free will, and sometimes people are fucking assholes. But I would say, for the most part, what we experience, the things that we go through on a daily basis, it is created by our reality. Our reality is created by our thoughts and our energy. And what that means is, whatever you believe, whatever you tell yourself, whatever you choose to believe is truth, ends up showing up in your reality. So even though I wasn't necessarily directly asking for this unhealthy, toxic, turbulent, roller coaster of a relationship and of a life, there was a part of me that got turned on by it. There was a part of me that it excited, not in the way where I was like, oh my gosh, I love this so much, I want it to keep happening. No, it's this darker version of our soul and our body that gets turned on by drama. And this happens to every single one of us, right? This is not something that any of us are exempt from. And unless we actually start to realize and identify that we're getting turned on and seduced by this way of living, we are not going to choose something different. Again, this is happening subconsciously. Your subconscious mind rules almost every single thing that you experience, right? So it truly is you realizing that you are connected to this part of you that is being run almost think of a movie projector that's always running in the back of your head. So based on what you believe and what you think is possible for you and what you think about yourself and how worthy you are going to keep perpetuating this reality, right? Okay. So yeah, someone said you wouldn't be who you are. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't go back and change anything. I'm just sharing my story because there's so much that people can learn from, especially when it comes to the mindset of it all, right? So yeah, definitely I was getting very comfortable in the situation. I was perpetuating my own reality. That was what I was, realizing, and that was what I was living in. That's really what my life looked like back then. And then so moving from that was a very non-linear thing. It was okay, I want to get out of this. But again, going back to your subconscious way of thinking, the way that you are believing, those things don't change overnight. So when I decided that I wanted to create a new reality, I didn't use those words back then because I didn't know those words back then. I knew I just wanted to live a different life, right? So it wasn't a linear, okay, I decided to move out from this. I decided to move away from this way of living. And then it just is upward from there. It's definitely not. It was very much like this. It would go up, it would come down. It would go up a little bit, it would come down even more. It would go up more, and then it would come down a little bit. And then it would just keep going like this until the trajectory ended up eventually going upwards. in a more abundant way. But it didn't look like that, especially in the beginning, right? It didn't look like that. It was very much like all I had known. So our comfort zone is not always our comfort zone is not always something that feels comfortable necessarily. It can feel toxic and abusive and unhealthy and damaging to your life and your lifestyle, but it can be so familiar to you that it does feel comfortable, right? I'm going to repeat that. Your comfort zone might not actually feel comfortable, but because you are so used to this way of living, it may have become comfortable to you. And I think that's something a lot of us don't realize, and I didn't realize it, or the severity of it until I was looking back at this and realizing how far I had come and just how deep I was in this way of living and being. Okay. So from there, I began realizing and opening up myself to different ways where I can make more money. I was starting to advance a little bit in my career. I was still going to school. I was working 3 jobs and getting food on the table for my daughter, right? We were on food stamps. We were below the poverty line. I was definitely barely making it every single month. I was borrowing money so that I wouldn't lose my place to stay. My daughter would eat before I would eat. There was a lot of moments where I would try to fall asleep earlier so I wouldn't be hungry late at night, so I wouldn't have to be hungry and want dinner. I would just try to fall asleep. I remember that's how bad it was. My bank account would be in the negatives, and then it would charge me an overdraft fee, which what the fuck? Why do banks have that? And I would go into the bank and tell them I don't have money to pay the overdraft fee. Can you please waive this? I don't have any means of paying this. And they would probably just take pity on me and be okay, you don't have to pay, just get out of here. It was really, really bad. And we look at our current circumstances and we constantly judge our future based on our current circumstances, which I think is a very normal thing to do. But I want to remind you that that's not necessarily true. Just because you're in a state of living right now doesn't mean that that's dictating your future. What dictates your future is not your current circumstances. What dictates your future is your thoughts and your energy, and the fact that you have the power to create your own reality. You have the power to create your own reality. I know for sure if I continued perpetuating that cycle and that pattern and that way of living, I would still be living in a 1-bedroom, barely making it, probably still on food stamps, and barely being able to provide for my daughter. She would not have been able to take that trip to Hawaii with me. She would not be in any of the summer camps she's in right now. She would not have been able to discover her love for ballet and be in ballet shows and learn how to swim. She takes swimming classes. She's done soccer classes. She would not have had any of those experiences. I would not have been able to build this business if I did not believe that I was worthy of a certain way of living, right? Every single thing that you think, every single thing that you believe is going to show up in your reality. Back then, when I was surrounded by other teen moms, because I lost all my friends. So I found a group of other teen moms that were also broke. And that was my company back then. And we would just get together and complain about how life sucked, right? And how our baby daddies were not taking care of their kids, and we were barely making any money. That was the circle that I would run in, because that was my mentality and the way that I viewed life. Of course it was, right? Of course I was living in that state of being, because I didn't know any different. I didn't know what was possible outside of that, right? And I think for so many of us too, we have to recognize that there are people that don't necessarily always have the resources to break out of that because of economic inequalities and different equity levels, right? Like there are so many minority communities that, and especially culturally, like when you are a person of color, when you are a woman of color, there are different resources that are different that you get access to or don't get access to because of who you are, right? And that's a really big thing that goes into this that I don't think that we talk about enough. So I'm so grateful that this is something that I was able to break out of, but it happened very, very slowly. I did not wake up one morning and decide that I wanted to become a CEO. That actually wasn't even on my mind at all. I just wanted a job that paid more than like $14 an hour. I just wanted to get food on the table, and I just wanted to honestly get by with a little bit more joy. I wasn't dreaming of building a business. I didn't even know how to. I didn't know that that was even possible for me. But slowly, as I began growing my social media platform, slowly as I began working with different brands, like I mentioned, I started off as an influencer. I began realizing that, hey, I can actually make money on my own, right? I was still working 3 jobs. I was still in school, but I had this side hustle as a creator online that was starting to make very little, by the way, but money, right? And for someone that's been broke forever, just seeing that little bit of money, even if it was like $25 for a post or like $50 for, like a story and a post or whatever it is to promote a product, because I was starting to build a following, I jumped at it. I remember wheeling my daughter around on a stroller and engaging on Instagram because I knew that's what was going to grow my account, right? I literally would be pushing her around so she would fall asleep around my studio that I was paying $1,000 for, just so she can fall asleep while she's crying, she's waking up, she's colicky. Colicky, if you don't know what that means, is a baby that just cries all night for no reason. It's like literally the worst thing. Like colicky babies are constantly whiny, and she was colicky, and I would be up all night. I would be the only one taking care of her, pushing her around on a stroller or like in some baby wrap, like bouncing her around while I was holding a phone in my hand, engaging, liking, commenting, following people so I can grow my account. And I would sit there and I would do that every single night. And then in the morning, at night, I would screenshot all the looks I wanted to make. Because again, I was a makeup blogger, right? In the morning, I would wake up an hour or 2 hours before she got up in the morning, which all of you know, if you know me, I'm not a morning person. I typically sleep until 11 or noon. But I would wake up so early before she would get up, and I would do my makeup. I would take pictures of it. I would promote the products that I was doing with the collaborations I was doing. I would create new artistic looks. And that's what I would do every single day. And then throughout the day, I would email at least 5 or 6 brands and say, hey, I'd love to collaborate with you, right? And that was my side hustle. And I was still working 2 to 3 other jobs and going to school. And I somehow found someone kind enough to watch my daughter because she understood what I was doing so that I can go to school. And I was working at home during the night. I was taking calls. I would work my schedule. My shift would be from midnight to 5 in the morning, right? And I would have to close the door if my daughter had woken up and she was screaming. I would have to push her back to sleep. And again, still engaging because I wanted to grow my account, responding to messages, responding to emails. And I was doing all of this because I was hustling. Like straight up hustler, right? Every single moment of every single day was so that I could give my daughter a better life and so that I could get out of the shithole that I was living in. Every single decision I made, I never went on dates. I never went out. I never drank. I never partied. I sacrificed so much, right? And of course, I could have done all those things, but I didn't want to. I truly was so focused on building a better life. I wasn't focused on building a business. I wasn't focused on becoming a multi-6-figure CEO. Again, I didn't even know those things could be possible for me. I didn't know those things could be possible for anyone that wasn't a 50-year-old white male that had made it up the corporate ladder. I didn't think that was possible for someone like me, a broke, struggling single mom that was on food stamps choosing to feed her daughter before herself. I didn't think that that was a reality. All I wanted was a little bit more money to pay the rent so that my landlord wouldn't threaten to kick me out again. That's all I wanted. That was the only thing that I wanted. And I kept doing that. I kept showing up to school and trying to get good grades, and I would get straight A's because I was so focused. I would wait till my daughter was asleep and just study. I would just study for hours. I would just do my homework for hours and make sure that everything was right so that there wasn't a reason for me to have to repeat a class again and to extend this, right? It was just so much. Like, I don't think anyone could ever understand the level of like pure determination if you aren't a like single mother that has to provide for her kid, right? I don't think that anyone understands that determination. Or if you have to provide for your family, if you are maybe a child of immigrants, right? And you have to send money back home, or your parents live here, but you have to take care of them financially. I don't think that anyone understands the weight on your shoulders when you have to care for someone other than just yourself, right? Some people have the privilege of just going to school and that's it. They don't have to work. They don't have to take care of a kid, you know? They don't have to do anything else. I had to go to school and raise a kid and, take care of all of these things. And again, like, I chose all of this in my reality. Subconsciously, my soul chose this life and this assignment and these lessons so I can become the person I am and share the story that I'm able to share now, right? And I can only hope that it does either inspire or motivate someone to realize that they're worthy of wherever you are right now. You can change your reality completely. I 100% believe in you. 100%. If there's no one else that believes in you, I fucking believe in you. If you've never been told that by anyone in your life, if everyone else is trying to bring you down and you're bringing yourself down because you're in such a dark mentality that you don't even know how to get out of it, I fucking believe in you. You can change your entire reality. It might not happen overnight and it might not be within the week or the month, but it is something that is possible for you if you are able and available to change your thoughts and your belief systems. And I know this because I was in the worst place financially, emotionally, spiritually. I literally see a dark cloud like hanging over me when I look back to that area of my life. Because I felt like there was no way of getting out. I felt shackled. I literally felt so restricted and limited, right? And I've never felt more free than I do right now. I have never felt more free, right? And the reason we go through this and the reason that we experience these types of things is not because the universe loves to see us suffer. It's not because the universe gets off on our miserableness. It's because we have the power to create our own reality. And sometimes, because we're stubborn, we have to go through these darker seasons, these darker nights of the soul in order to learn the lessons we have to learn in order to become who we are. We probably wouldn't learn it any other way because we wouldn't choose for that thing to happen. But subconsciously we did. Subconsciously we've manifested every single thing, every single event in our life in order to become who we are, right? So I wouldn't have changed any of that, because I know that I wouldn't be here talking to you about it today. I wouldn't be here able to teach you how to build a business, which is what I do as a business coach. I wouldn't be able to teach you manifestation as a manifestation teacher. And I wouldn't be able to share these stories if I weren't to have gone through every single one of those experiences. Oh, some of you are saying you're crying. I know, I'm like trying not to get emotional so I can finish the rest of the story. So I think this is really when I realized, when I started making a little bit of money, I started working with some brands. I was like, okay, there's something here, right? And at this point I was working a day job. I was working a 9-to-5, and then COVID hit. And it's funny because right before COVID hit, I had done my first masterclass, because at this point I had gained a bigger audience at this point. And this is all manifestation, by the way. This is all me manifesting my life. It is literally just creating your own reality. And I'm doing a little 3-week course that I'm going to be launching about manifestation, if that's something that you all are interested in learning more about. So at that point, I had just taught an Instagram masterclass that had sold out to teach people how to grow their Instagram, right? And I was like, wow, okay, I didn't even think of starting a coaching business. I didn't even think about a business beyond just the masterclass. I'd started getting asked to speak on panels and different events and different things around social media and digital marketing and, following and things like that, right? So I was like, you know what? I could teach a class of my own. And I did. And after that, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I started to coach some students that had joined just to say thank you for joining the class. I was like, hey, let me just offer you a free coaching session and as to say thank you for, joining the class. This is what I didn't even start a business. I didn't even know really what it was. I just wanted to help them get started because a lot of these people that joined were either my friends or I'd met them at some place. And so I wanted to give something back to them. And then I started just falling in love with it. I loved it. And then COVID hit and I lost my job. And I honestly thought it was like the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened. It was the best. I remember crying. I remember telling my boss, like, I'm going to get kicked out of my place. I'm not going to be able to pay rent. I was like, can you please? I was like, I'll do anything. Like, I will literally do anything. And he was like, we're a small startup. We can't pay you anymore. We're downsizing. We're cutting out a couple people. I remember sobbing, just saying like, please, I will literally do anything. I will not be able to pay rent. I will not be able to afford anything anymore outside of this. Like, I remember just feeling so desperate. I remember thinking, oh my God, am I going to have to go back and live with my parents? Like, I haven't lived with my parents until they kicked me out when I found out I was pregnant, right? I didn't even know if they would let me live with them. They probably would have, right? And it was just it was such a moment of like, oh my God, what is going to happen? And just looking back, I can see how obviously those emotions were so valid, but it really ramped me into this season of life where I was like, I am going to take this shit into my own hands. I was like, I am not relying on anyone for my finances anymore. I'm not going to answer to anyone like that anymore. I can make money on my own. I've done it. I've done it as a creator. I've done it speaking on panels. I've done it teaching classes. I taught a masterclass at this point, right? And so even then I wasn't really thinking about what it could look like to start my own business. I was just like, okay, what can I do in order to get food on the table? So I was still coaching some of those clients that was from my class. And I ended up just offering like a 3-month package, right? I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do this for like 3 months instead of just like a one-off, and it would be this much money. And at this point, I had also started a Facebook group for other creators, and I had grown to like 17,000 members, which is crazy. It just like literally blew up. I don't know how that happened. I really don't. But anyway, I had this Facebook group. So I just posted on there. I was so anxious. I was so nervous because I'd never charged for anything other than like with brands. I'd never worked with clients, right? Everything I did was with brands. And so at that point I posted it and it just took off. It was like the universe was like, jump, jump, jump. I promise I'm going to catch you. I promise I'm going to catch you. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. It was like, jump, I promise I'm going to catch you. And I was like, no, I can't. Like, there's so much riding on this and I can't do it. Right. And I jumped and the universe was like, I got you. I got you. And at that moment, I was like, oh my God, everything that I do from here on out is somehow guided by something that I don't even know existed, right? It's like bigger than anything that I could have ever expected. And so from there, literally on my 2nd month of business, I hit a 10K month, which was crazy. I'd never heard of something like that. And then in 8 months, I hit 6 figures. And then within the first year, I had surpassed $200,000 in revenue. And there wasn't a perfect way for me to do this. I didn't follow any perfect strategy. I didn't follow what some teacher or mentor had said to me, right? It wasn't anything like that. It was just me trusting in the universe over and over and over and over again. It was me taking the leap over and over. It was me messing up over and over and being messy and scrappy and learning, so much trial and error. And then I really dove into manifestation and mindset and law of attraction, everything that I teach now towards the end of the first year, because I realized I was still hustling. I realized I was still in scarcity mode, because now it wasn't, oh my gosh, where's the money going to come from? It was, now I have the money and I'm so afraid it's going to leave, right? There's always something that our brain is going to feed to us. And so I really had to create the security around money and realize that I can be financially free, that I can be the six-figure earner. And now I'm getting very, very close to $1 million. So 7-figure earner, that I've created out of nothing. And there has to be security. There has to be love and worthiness that isn't attached to your money, right? Because I believe that money is energy, and you can always tap into energy, the currency of money, whenever you want to. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, share it on your Instagram stories, and tag me at tiffanychung.co. I truly appreciate interacting with every one of you. Catch you all on the next one.